Yeah, okay, beautiful. All right, well, thank you everyone who is joining right now. This webinar is also being recorded, so it is going to be available later. This webinar that we're putting on with Petzl and with Jimmy is covering safety plans, job safety assessments, and rescue plans. So we're going to cover some of the basics of those topics, give you a jumping off point, sort of understand what sort of preparation you should have when you are getting ready to do work at a job site. And we've got some custom videos that were filmed at Petzl showing various types of rescues using window cleaning setups. So that's all really exciting stuff. We'll get to shortly. Also wanted to point out that we're doing a giveaway, and just by registering for this webinar, you've already entered. We're giving away a Petzl Vertex Vent helmet, and we'll announce somebody who has won that at the end of this webinar, so stay tuned for that. We already did our intros briefly, but one disclaimer before we jump into the content. The stuff that we're covering here is not a substitute for proper training. This is just informational, introductory type of stuff. So know that as we get into this. All right, we already did intros, but we've got Nate from Petzl, myself from ABC, and Jimmy from Outlook Window Cleaning on the call today. And we'll be talking about the job safety analysis and the safety plans and the rescue plans. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat. You'll see that inside of the webinar here, there's a spot to fill in any comments you have or any questions, and we'd be happy to address those. So in the webinar, we're going to be talking about job safety analysis, and we have an example of one, which Nate from Petzl will be running you through. We're going to be talking about rope descent systems, or RDS, versus rope access. What's the difference? We're going to get some real-world perspective from Jimmy about some of the benefits of introducing elements of rope access into your window cleaning setup. We're going to be talking about rescue plans, and that'll feature some of the custom-made videos that I had mentioned. We'll have a Q&A, and we'll announce the winner of that helmet. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Nate, who is going to start telling you a little bit about the things you should be thinking about with job safety analysis.
Yeah, for sure. This is obviously a very key component to running a job site. And what we do here in the Petzl Technical Institute is we have a template here for our JSA. So there's kind of some confusion there. I've heard of JSAs and JHAs. In my mind, like a job hazard analysis or a JHA would be something where we go through and we identify all of the hazards specifically, whereas more comprehensive information is contained in a job safety analysis. So a lot of really good important information in here. And again, we kind of use this as a template for our facility. It's a very controlled environment. There's not a lot of changes to the climate or different things that are going on like that. However, we do service a lot of different industries here. So the at-height tasks or training that we're conducting here can change drastically between different markets. But there's a lot of elements in here that stay the same. And important information needs to be obtained in here. Things like the supervisor or the trainer, their name, their contact information, the dates that are associated with the training, and then specifically the job or the training description or the task description. It needs to be laid out very clearly so that everyone is understanding what the scope of the job is going to be. And then that also gives them an opportunity to kind of chime in and say whether they're comfortable at those tasks or not. And then additionally, we talk about different things like our work at height access methods. How are we going to access the job site? How are we going to get to that work zone effectively? What are the pieces of equipment that are going to be used in that kind of stuff? What kind of anchors are we using? What kind of redundancy is associated with that? And then also talking about different zones. So we have different names for different zones in the facility or on the job site that we need to kind of clarify so that people know what's required of them once they start moving into those different zones, as far as their PPE that they're wearing or the hazards that are associated with being inside of those zones. So we definitely clearly lay those zones out. It's discussed to all of the students before we start moving forward. And we also have a lot of safety tape and marking and very clear designated areas where those zones lie so that people aren't confused about them. In fact, we have custom signage that we put up that is specific to the facility, whether or not PPE is required or what's going on within that specific zone. Again, we go through that as a template document here. And then moving into what kind of equipment is going to be required here, we do have kind of a checklist box in our required safety equipment that we run through here. And that can even include things like water, sunscreen, things like that. So if we're doing some sort of training outside where it's hot, where we have other conditions that we need to pay attention to, we have those on there. Activities like if we're doing some sort of like tree training here, we require obviously hearing protection and eye protection and things like that. So depending on what we're going through, that will dictate the different equipment that we're using there. And then also on this, a big part of it is going to be our rescue plan. So not only just what the rescue plan is, who's going to be doing that, and where's the equipment located to kind of run through that rescue plan. Obviously, when we're on a job site, we have a lot of skilled technicians who are familiar with at-height tasks. And so maybe one of those workers is going to be designated to be the lead for conducting the rescue if that comes into play. But a rescue plan needs to be well communicated and needs to be planned out. And then we also run through our job specific hazards. We do have categories here where we have the task and the condition, the hazard that is associated with that, and then the control measures that we take to limit those hazards. So obviously we have clear indications on all of the different activities we're going to do and what we're doing to limit those hazards, whether it's backup systems, pads on the floor, lanyards for swing potentials, swing hazards, and things like that. And then the last kind of component of our JSA is another checkbox, because these are very consistent elements that we find on our training side as well as in job side of things. But things like falling potential, human errors with equipment, having oversight there, using two-rope systems and things like that. We talk about sharp and abrasive edges, lanyarding tools, things like that, loose materials and clothing that are hazardous for our work. We also talk about different things like noise and different things like flip hazards, trip hazards, and things like that. And I think the last component of this is just that everyone is well aware of what's going on for the job site. So everyone has been informed of all of the hazards, the equipment, the job tasks, the rescue plan, and then we've gone through and communicated that with everyone who's going to be on the job site or in the training facility, and then we have them sign off on that. So the last part of this is detailed information about the day, their name and phone number, their emergency contact information, and then an indication here that they have been briefed on the JSA and that they are signing off to go do the job for that day. So these things can change from day to day. It seems like if you're working and it's a nice, bright, sunny day, maybe rain comes in, the next day you're working on the job, you're going to have to update this JSA and indicate that those new hazards are present. So yes, and then on this presentation, if you want to just kind of scan through it, Jacob, I can walk through these pages that correspond with what I was going through if you want. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so do you want me to jump back to the first page?
Sure. Yeah, page 1. Again, kind of like I talked through there, all of the information about who's in charge of it. So contact information, the job, the task that's going to go on there, the access systems and the anchorages that we're using. All the zones are clearly labeled there and kind of the requirements that are associated with each one of those zones. So we have clear indication there, like where people are exposed to hazards, where they're exposed to, fall hazards or trip hazards or things like that, and then where the safe zone is. So then you flip to the next page.
If I can pipe in on that one too, Nathan.
Yeah.
These are good things to have in-house, but they're also, for your clients, if you're a window cleaner, most management ask for something like this. And so when you're able to do this, you're able to communicate with the owner or the client, and those zones, defining those zones with your clients can really be helpful, and it's something that they appreciate as well.
Yeah, very clear communication about what you're doing with your crew as well as the employers is also, you know, transparency is great for the job site. So on the next page, if you want to scan forward. Yeah, so like I was talking about there, we have the checkbox there that kind of runs through the required safety equipment. This is kind of, you know, our standard go-to, whether it's a sit harness, a fall arrest harness, whether it's a, you know, a 2-rope system, if we're running any sort of delay in the facility, different things like closed-toed shoes, helmets, goggles, ear protection. It just is all dependent on what job we're doing. So if we're working with someone who's doing, you know, a task on the back of the climbing wall when they're running a grinder, obviously we're going to incorporate things like face shields, ear protection, gloves. Whereas maybe a different user group wouldn't require those kinds of pieces of PPE. So, and then right under that, when we talk about the safety equipment that we're using there, we also go through the rescue plan in detail. So where is the kit located? What are the different components of that kit? Typically, we have a pre-built system here that allows us to do a quick raise to release someone from whatever they're suspended on and then conduct a lowering operation. So
cool. Yeah, and we do have a video that we'll jump to in a little bit that actually shows that type of rescue amongst some others.
Yeah, so and that's clearly indicated in all of our rescue plan in every scenario. So taking a look at the job site and then identifying the most hazardous areas and what would we be doing for rescue operation if that had to happen in a specific location needs to be clearly indicated on here. So right into that, we go through the job specific hazards. Like I said before, we have the task or the condition that we're going to be working on, what the hazards are that are associated with that, and then the control measures that we're taking for that. Things like drop tools, we would indicate, you know, lanyards on the harness and all tools. That would be a control measure that we would do for an example there.
Yeah, a really cool thing about, a really cool thing I think about this template that Petzl has here is it has, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you make this. You know, so this one is specific to the Petzl facility, but you're going to run into the same types of hazards over and over again with, you know, high-rise window cleaning. So you could pre-fill a lot of this information and then just check the appropriate boxes. And so it'll save you a lot of work each time just by upfront getting this the way that you want. And then you can still have blank spots for unique hazards that are particular to some job site.
Yeah, like the ones, on that right side of this page, like you're saying, Jacob, this is like all kind of like pre-built stuff that's in there. You know, falling, human error, communication difficulty, sharp abrasive surfaces. Those are just a quick example of those check boxes that we can go through, and then the hazards and the controls that are associated with that. So pretty easy to kind of just find the hazard or the condition that you're looking at and just do the checkbox, and then it's all associated with it there. If you need to go back through on the left side of the screen there and fill those out, it's easy to do that if it's something that's not included into the checkbox portion of the JSA.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention on those, Jacob, if you go back one more,
sure.
Just a human error, right? Because if we think about accidents that do happen, usually it is human error, right? It's not the equipment failing, but it's something that we've done, and so you know that's one of the important reasons why we see the progress of safety and the importance of a 2-rope system, independent anchors, those type of things that really can eliminate some of that human error, and then you know all the other things. But that's the one I want to just highlight real quick.
Yeah, that's
sure.
a good
So
one
you'll pretty much, you'll always be checking that box.
Exactly.
Until you have a job site and there's no humans present. You can leave that one off.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and then this last sheet here on the left, it does clearly indicate there that, like, you know, you've had a conversation with whoever the lead supervisor is on the job site is, and that they've gone through all these different things very clearly before the work is beginning. There's some check mark boxes. I don't know if it's coming through on the slideshow very well, but it does say things like, by signing my name below, I acknowledge that I've been provided with all this information, and that includes things like the work plan, the tasks, the access zone, the hazards, all those different things that we've talked about that are included in this JSA. They've gone through it and they understand that information. And then just below that, we've got the date and their initial, and then their information there for saying that they have gone through this and they've been notified of everything that's associated with it. And then that last page over there on the right, again, this is like uncommon stuff. So if I'm working around machinery, another, again, checkbox here for the hazard and the control that we're going to be doing this with those. But these are kind of like out of the normal ones, things like, animal bites and stings, bird and animal feces, snow and ice, lightning. These are just different conditions that kind of come up on the job site that maybe we need to kind of pay attention to. And for your guys' industry, obviously, you're not working in a training facility like the PTI facility here. So all of these things seem like they would be pretty present on the job site for you guys, especially right now. Rain, wet conditions, ice, things like that.
So you'd be customizing this obviously to your situation. So these are uncommon for the Petzl training facility, but pretty common for a high-rise window cleaner.
Yeah, I mean, most window cleaners will agree that birds are their nemesis. So,
For sure.
And like you say, we use this document whether we're in the facility or outside of the facility. If we're doing any sort of training or photo shoots or anything like that that is outside of the facility here, obviously we're going to update the conditions and the hazards that are associated with what we're doing. So.
All right, so switching gears slightly, probably a lot of people watching are already familiar with this distinction, but there is sort of a difference between rope descent systems, or RDS, versus rope access. There's sort of common definitions of this that are just kind of like common sense in the equipment you're using, but there's also very specific definitions, which Nate, I think, can run us through a little bit, and then Jimmy's going to tell us a little bit about some real world experience with bringing rope access world into window cleaning.
Yeah, for sure. I think the kind of the biggest thing here is if we take a look at that exact verbiage from the OSHA 1910 definition there, the very last part of it that's bolded out is rope descent systems do not include industrial rope access systems. So kind of different there. And from my experience there, when we look at the left side of it, the RDS system, obviously it's downward movement only. We're not really changing over and progressing back up the ropes. We're conducting our operations top to bottom. The descender and the descent system typically is only attached to the seat. From my experience, that is just a direct connection to the bosun's seat or the chair, which the worker just sits into. For me, that was a very uncomfortable scenario to get into, where my system is completely connected, except for I'm not actually flipped directly into my descent system. So for someone like me who doesn't do this kind of operation very often, it was a little unnerving. So I immediately had some sort of secondary tether that I clipped in to myself, my harness that was on me, into my descent system in the chair.
Yeah,
so
and just to comment on that too, even though it's very common that window cleaners are not directly attached to their descent system, it is considered, I would say, a best practice that a high-rise window cleaner still would have some sort of direct connection, like from their harness to their bosun chair, or to their descender, even though that's unfortunately somewhat uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, sad to say that's the way I was, first trained on how to clean windows, is separate. You'd step into your bosun system and you'd have your, harness attached to it, your safety rope, and so it was a separate system.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think the last part of it, I mean, of course, we're backed up with the independent 3-foot fall arrest lanyard, typically connected to the dorsal point. From my experience, anytime I've ever done anything suspended from my dorsal attachment point, it's really difficult to self-rescue. It's very uncomfortable. I don't care what harness you're in, it's really uncomfortable to hang off your dorsal attachment point. So yeah, in my mind, yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, and similarly, even though that is a common setup, the IWCA has been pushing for quite a long time to have front connections to your backup device, even in the rope descent system setup. And it's in recognition of that exact fact that it's much easier to rescue yourself off your front D-ring than your back D-ring.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll see that in the videos coming up a little later on, but it's very clear to see what it takes to get out of suspension on a sternal attachment point versus suspension on a dorsal attachment point. So, so then when we look on the other side of there, the rope access system, the SPRAT techniques, right? So descender and descent system is attached directly to the worker's harness. That's going to be right there at that ventral attachment point. They have a higher level of on-rope training. So doing different maneuvers where we're transferring rope to rope, or we're looking at things like deviations or redirects of rope anchorages and ropes. You have the ability to kind of navigate through those different kinds of rope systems. You can transition from descent to ascent and vice versa very quickly. There's also another video at the end here that kind of shows the quick transition between those two different movements. And then also integrating a seat for comfort is totally possible, right? So you don't have to have an independently connected bosun that you get into. You can have a chair that's connected right into your harness, into your descender, add a lot more comfort to that system. And then the last part of it here, working on 2 rope systems, you always have a backup, an independent backup system. And when those fall arrest components are connected sternally, per OSHA standard, you have to keep that fall arrest system at less than 2 foot free fall potential. It's a lot easier to do that when you're working a rope access system. Easier to progress that fall arrest system up the rope without it really traveling and falling below that 2 foot free fall potential. And then it's a lot easier to perform a self-rescue. Like I said, we'll see a video in the future here, and it's a lot easier to get yourself out of that scenario if you're not hanging on your dorsal attachment point.
Cool. All right. So jumping over to Jimmy with a little real world experience. And of course, we've got this stunning photo of Jimmy. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your experience of bringing rope access into the window cleaning world and kind of how that's impacted your just your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. First thing there, the safety and redundancy. With that separate system where you have a bosun's chair and then your harness, you think about if you end up on that harness, what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen with your chair, your bucket, everything that's attached to that? Are you going to be able to self-rescue? So the integration of chair and harness is really a key, I think, to safety, and also ergonomics too. The fact that, like Nate was saying, you have your chair attached to yourself. I always say, whether it's a helmet or it's a harness, if you forget that it's on, then you know that it's something that's comfortable and designed, for real world use. And sometimes that'll happen. You'll forget you've got your harness on, or you forget you've got your helmet on because of the comfort there with that. And so I really appreciate that about, the design of certain products. So the ease and ability to self-rescue and rescue others, that as well is really important and integral to our system now that we keep. That can really, it could mean someone's life. The fact that if you're able to get to them and save them quickly, or yourself in a situation that could be hairy. When we're at height, really, it behooves us to be able to do all of these things so that we can keep ourselves safe, and also really it helps set the standard for everyone else around us, our competitors. If we're bringing that standard high for ourselves, then our competitors are going to see that and they're going to say, hey, we need to step up our game as well. So the ergonomics and comfort, if you think about it, if you're comfortable and you're able to maneuver well, then you're going to do a better job. You're going to be able to put more pressure on your squeegee. You're going to be able to effectively scrub that window, and that's going to give a better product to your clients. So that's really important, that being agile. To be able to ascend and descend is also important. There's certain drops that you're going to do where you have to ascend and descend. If you think about roller work, where you're traversing the side of a building and going side to side on that, sometimes the roof line will dip and go along with the water flow that's on the roof, and so you're going to raise and lower on that window, and so sometimes you're going to need to be able to adjust that safely. So with this system, you're able to do that. And then just looking professional, right? If you've got some Wild West, basic setup that makes you look like a construction worker that's cleaning windows, that doesn't come across as very professional. And so really, when you have an integrated system, it makes you look good, and helps your clients feel more comfortable and at ease with what you're doing. That can be a very dangerous job.
Yeah, for sure. The professionalism piece jumped out to me, not only from using this equipment and knowing how to do these additional techniques, but also when we were looking at the JSA earlier, having a very professional JSA to hand to the building owner or manager. I think that looks very professional and makes them feel like they've brought on a company that's going to do the job right and safely and knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And here's the thing too, is window cleaning, sad to say, is competitive. And we've actually been able to retain or get clients, even though our prices are higher than our competitors, because of that. Because we hand them that professional JSA, they see what we're doing, and amongst other things, that can really be the separation between gaining clients and losing clients.
Just curious, have you ever received specific feedback from one of your customers that they chose you because of that type of thing?
Yes, sad to say.
All right.
That's I can think of one client in one high-rise building where our price was almost double the previous folks, but they were kind of Wild West junk show.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, people always talk about that sort of thing, but it's nice to hear in the real world that actually did result in a job, because I think a lot of people would have hesitations about this sort of thing because, like, the equipment, and we're not talking huge amounts, but the equipment that you need to do rope access versus RDS is more expensive upfront cost. And so, to some people, they're just wondering, is that really going to be worth it?
Yeah. Here's the thing, though. With window cleaning, your overhead is so low compared to other, jobs and types of equipment that they're using, and so why not have the best? It's you could write that off on your taxes. Do
That's
it.
a good point. We do recommend people buy all of the most expensive gear.
Yes, there you go.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you for that. Super interesting. So the next thing that we were going to cover is rescue plans. One thing, of course, to note is this discussion of rescue plans we're about to have is not exhaustive. It's not going to cover every possible situation. And just as a reminder, this is not a substitute for proper training. But with all of that being said, we did cover a few of the most common types of rescues and most common scenarios. And so you'll see coming up here some videos of the Petzl staff in their training facility performing some of these rescues. And so you can kind of get some flavor for how these sorts of things work. So Nate, do you mind running us through the basic types of rescue we're about to see, and then we'll actually dive into those videos?
Yeah, for sure. Let's see here. What is our first one we're going to look at? Self-rescue of a worker. Okay. Mainline failure hanging from their front D-ring. Yeah, so this is, in this video, you're going to see some backup systems we always have in the facility here, whether you see in these videos they're on one rope or two ropes. We always have padding. It's a very controlled environment, so this is just demonstrational purposes only. But yeah, I think we're going to see here Keith running through self-rescue from a worker with a mainline failure hanging from their front D-ring, and we can kind of take a look at, I believe he's just going to be spent at 100% on his fall rest attachment point.
Yeah, well, let's dive in and we'll have a look at it.
Take a look at it. If I remember which video is going on, I'll talk through it as it goes on.
Yeah, so we can see here Keith is hanging from his backup device on his front D-ring.
Oh yeah, yeah. So he's potentially had some sort of a mainline failure. His ASAP is grabbed, and see with the ability to have it connected to your sternal attachment point, it keeps the body in the right orientation and a very good upright position that allows him to connect his descender right back onto the rope quickly, and then add his ascender so that he can pull some slack up into the system. And essentially what he's doing there is just creating enough slack into that rope between his body weight and that ASAP fall arrestor that has stopped his downward movement enough for just long enough time for him to release that ASAP and get it moving again.
Yeah, beautiful.
Not sure why.
Yeah.
Not sure why it stopped right there, but.
Oh yeah, that's just the end of this video.
Okay. So yeah, he's just basically made his way up and up.
You can use your imagination that he makes it the rest of the way to the ground.
Yeah. So at this point, all he's done is removed his ascender. He's completely suspended into his descender now, and he's unlocked his ASAP so that he can make his downward movement, and he'll just descend at this point.
Yeah. Here, I'll play it one more time. Keith makes it look so easy and does this so quickly.
Yeah. So he's just got some slack below that ASAP that has grabbed onto the rope. He just adds the ID on there, gets his ascender on there so he can just progress up the rope a tad until he's 100% weighted onto that ID and not onto his ASAP. And now at this point, he can unlock that ASAP and continue his descent.
Yeah, and I was just going to comment too, just, always having an ascender with you. Back in the day, we used to use ascenders as our backup device, and obviously that's not something we do anymore. But still, having an ascender there just for that upward mobility, man, that can really just save you an embarrassing situation. Avoiding that embarrassing situation, being able to, get out of that yourself.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and if you notice, it didn't really take much upward movement for him to release that ASAP. I mean, he only went up like a foot or so, and that was all it really took for him to release the locking component of that ASAP. So, yeah, you can see it again here. It's just a very short movement for him to do that.
In a real world situation, this could happen where you maybe locked out your ASAP because you're working in a situation for a long period of time, and then you forget that you've got it locked, and then you wrap down and you're below it, and you're like, oh man, how embarrassing for me.
Right, yeah. If somebody had to come, that's
right.
Not where you want somebody to come have to rescue you.
Yeah, you're going to get heckled by your coworkers if that's the case.
Yeah, for sure. See what the next one we have to take a look at is here.
Next one, it looks like, so this is me hanging unconscious, but still in my bosun's chair. So he's treating it like he just had to come down here and get to me. He makes his primary attachment to my sternal attachment point on the harness. So now I'm connected to him. And then all he does is just lower my system until I'm weighted onto him 100%. So at that point, he can release me from my main line, still attached to my backup system. You can see the ASAP and the fall arrest system behind me. And then now all Keith has done is add a little more friction with that carabiner redirected there. That's what we require for a 2-person load. So with me suspended off of him, he just does that redirect with the break end of the rope, and then we can continue the descent.
Let's hit play on that again. And so this type of rescue is called a Pickoff Rescue.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the good thing about this one though is that he doesn't need to bring me up or raise me up to release me from one of my systems, since I'm 100% on my descender at this point. All he really needs to do is make a connection to me, lower me out of my system, and then put me onto him to make that descent.
And if I could as well, like, that's another perk of using some of Petzl's products, is they are rated for 2 people with that extra backup hitch. And some of the Petzl products have those that you can attach to the device as well. So that's just a nice thing to have.
Awesome. All right, yeah, let's take a look at the next one we've got here, which I believe is another type of pickoff rescue.
I think this is me falling out of my bosun's chair, and now I'm 100% suspended on my dorsal attachment point on my harness on my fall arrest system. So that's me just simply hanging dorsal on my ASAP. So now you can see here Keith needs to bring me up to release me from my system. So he just attaches the JAG system, which is in a 5-to-1 mechanical advantage configuration at this point, clips it to that dorsal, raises me up enough so that he can release that ASAP that's locked on the rope, and then he can just leave that JAG on there as his tether connected to me, and then continue on with the descent there. Again, redirected rope with a 2-person load on there for Keith. But you can see that quickly right there, he can raise me up with a real quick mechanical advantage system, unclip or release my suspension onto that ASAP, and then put me onto him. And Amy, hanging on your dorsal attachment point, if you've not done it before, as far as high level of pain being a 10, it's probably an 11. I definitely encourage everyone to hang on their dorsal attachment point for a minute just to see how it feels and how terrible it would be if you had to hang there for a long period of time.
Yeah,
Much more
totally.
comfortable.
Second that.
Yeah, it's terrible. And then, and the harnesses that you all are wearing in this video are really nice rope access harnesses. So, and it was already not very comfortable. If you're in, an inexpensive fall arrest harness, it's going to be a lot worse.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, one of those cheap construction ones, those may hold you into that position, but that is not a great place to be for a long period of time. The other thing I was going to mention about that video too, what's nice about the JAG system too, is if there's a weight difference between the individual rescuing, let's say, Nate had put on a few pandemic pounds there, and he outweighed Keith, that JAG system, helps compensate for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very simple way of raising someone. So yeah, that was really simple there. Again, we're in a training facility. There's a bunch of pads underneath this. So for me being suspended on that one single line, we're comfortable doing that in this facility. I wouldn't want to be suspended on one rope off my back at a job site way up off the ground, but.
No, certainly not. And so this type of rescue would most commonly happen if somebody was working on scaffolding and for some reason the scaffolding fell or collapsed, and now they're hanging on their backup line. Or this is also the situation we were talking about earlier where they were in their bosun chair but they weren't directly connected to it, and so maybe they slipped out of it or the main line failed, and then they're not connected to their front D-ring where it would have been easier to self-rescue, though it's not impossible on your back D-ring, but much more difficult. But yeah, so this person has fallen and is either unable to rescue themselves because they don't have the equipment, or maybe they're unconscious or whatever.
Yep.
All right. Next one we've got is a little bit different of a flavor than these first few that we've looked at. This is lowering them from a system that you have at the top.
Yeah, so if you have someone still up on the roof or near the anchor point, and you need to help them out. So what he's doing here is, this is our JAG rescue kit. So it's everything all in one piece. So he's got right now a rope grab. That's our rescue sender connected to the end of the rope. He's gonna go below the edge. So just over the edge there, so he can kind of put that rope grab down low, pulling the tension out of the system now so it's nice and tight. And now all he's gonna do is just use that JAG to haul up on the rope, and you can see that one rope went slacked now that was suspended on. So now you can disconnect that. And that other blue rope that's there is the backup rope. So they're still on their ASAP or their fall arrest system. And so now all he's doing is just making the system nice and clean, tying a knot in the end of the rope there, or in the middle of it, so that you can connect that to the rope grab. It's all nice and clean. And now it's disconnected from the anchor, and he can go ahead and lower the casualty or the worker to the ground on this whole new system. So as long as he has enough rope in that bucket in that JAG rescue kit, that yellow line, he can do his lowering as far as needed for that injured worker.
Yeah, another flavor of this type of rescue that some window cleaning companies do is they actually have, like in this visual, they would have their worker already working on that yellow line in the first place. And so then you wouldn't have even had to take slack off of that blue rope. You'd already have them on the line that you're ready to go with the descender to rescue.
Yeah.
That's probably the fastest possible way to be rescuing somebody. It does, of course, have the downside that you'd have to have this whole rescue set up on each worker individually, so you couldn't just have a single rescue kit on site. So you would definitely have more cost in equipment. And then when you're also doing this type of rescue, like in that scenario, you would need twice the length of rope of the job, at least.
Yep.
So if you're doing a 300-foot job, then you're going to need at least 600 feet of rope to be able to perform this type of rescue.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jacob, too. Like just doing a releasable anchor system, pre-threading the rope into your ID, and then creating a knot or some sort of a security system to clip off the brake strand of that ID while the work is being conducted. And if there was anything that happened, exactly what you said, you could come up, untie that knot, and then just lower them to the ground if you needed to. Very quick operation for rescue.
So in general, what do you think somebody should be, or as they're kind of considering the different types of rescue that they could do and put into their safety plan, how should they decide which of these is the way to go for them?
Well, really, your jobs that you're on, the workers that you have as employees, their qualifications, what they're qualified to do, whether they've been SPRAT trained or not. One of the nice things about SPRAT training is it, depending on your level, you're able to actually lower somebody into a position. Maybe let's say there's an electrician or something that needs to get to a position, and you can, have the qualifications and the skill set to be able to get somebody there into those positions. And so really it's just looking at what the scope of work that you have, your job sites that you have, the dangers there, and then making that, education as far as that goes. But, you always just want to err on the side of safety. And so some of these situations may seem like, oh, well, we're not going to deal with that. Or that would be super extreme if we did deal with that. Well, why not be prepared for that type of situation so that you can handle it?
Sure. Yeah, and in case anyone watching isn't aware, SPRAT is the Society for Professional Rope Access Technicians, and they have a training program that you can go through where you learn these rope access techniques. All right, so let's see. I think we're coming close to the end of our pre-prepared slides, and then we have a few questions to go through. Okay, yeah, so that's our last slide. Before we jump into the questions, I wanted to announce we did pick a winner from people who had registered and have been watching. So we've got a winner selected for the Petzl Vertex Vent helmet. So it looks like our winner is Zach Dahlman. So congrats, Zach. We've got your email since you registered. So Amy is going to reach out to you, figure out where you'd like this sent, and we're going to get it on its way to you. All right. So we earlier this week we posted out about this webinar on our social media and got back some questions. And so we'll just kind of go through a few of those now with our last 10 minutes on this webinar. So one question, first question, to what extent can you use the same safety plan from job to job, and to what extent does it need to be customized for each job? So, like, can I have the same safety plan and just apply it across the board, or does it need to be custom to each job? Or or maybe more specifically, if I have the same building I go to every quarter, can I just use the same safety plan for that every time, or does it have to be customized each time I go there, each quarter? What do you guys think about that?
I think. Oh, go. You want me to go, Nate?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Jimmy would be a great one to answer this. I can tell you what we do here in the facility and kind of my perspective on it, but Jimmy would have a much better knowledge of this than me.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things, yeah, you can copy and paste, right, that are going to be uniform on certain jobs, but you want to keep that fresh, and you want to have those dates to be, every day, have those dates be a new date. That should be a requirement on most jobs, is to have that, updated every day. And so, as a business owner or as an employee for a company, you want to be able to make sure to customize that for each job. And there's going to be certain environments that are going to change. The building, the structure itself may always be the same, but the environment that it's in changes. And so you want to make sure that you're adaptable to those changes that might happen, whether they're, weather or construction or things like that.
All right. I think a great... sorry, go ahead, Nate.
Oh, I was just going to say, kind of jumping back to the professionalism aspect of this too, is like if you have new crew members and they're, you're basically creating a culture of safety and paying attention to it. If you're doing these, toolbox talks every day with your crew, you're getting used to, like, you're familiarizing them with what a professional job site should look like. And I think that that's really good for new and younger workers to kind of learn from that kind of stuff, that you're very comprehensive on the job site, the safety elements, everybody's informed of the hazards, and you're using quality equipment. I think that speaks loudly to not just your clients, but also your coworkers or your employees.
Yeah, and the last thing I was going to say is, I think a lot of people would find this sort of thing very cumbersome, but like we saw in the template that that Nate was sharing earlier, you can already have quite a bit of this pre-written and copy paste and check the appropriate boxes. So it's not like you have to write the whole thing from scratch every time, even though it is being customized to each job to some extent. Okay, so another question we got is a safety plan and the JSA and all of that sort of stuff, is that just a industry best practice, or is that actually an OSHA requirement?
My knowledge of OSHA, I was just going to say, my knowledge of the OSHA requirements there is that they do require a hazard assessment to be done, and that everyone has gone through and been trained on those hazards and how to identify those hazards. They also require in OSHA a rescue plan to be incorporated, and that means that there is the equipment indicated, just kind of like I've indicated in the JSA that we run here, is that you have a specific operation for rescue if it needs to be done, and who's going to do that and what equipment is going to be used with that. That's all required by OSHA. So yeah, I don't know if that falls outside of anything else with these JSAs or whatnot, but OSHA does require a hazard assessment to be done, whether it's documented and it's on the site. I'm not familiar with that.
And I was just going to add that don't let the OSHA standards be your standard. You should exceed those standards. OSHA is going to have, these minimal requirements, but you as an owner, or, maybe you're a building manager, you should be able to exceed those and add to that.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. All right, here's this one I think is probably tongue in cheek. But you got to have a rescue plan, right? Is calling 911 and having the fire department come rescue you an acceptable rescue plan?
That depends on the circumstances, right? But like we talked about earlier, like what if you lower past your ASAP and you get stuck there? That's why this information is so vital, just because you don't want to have to call the fire department or be rescued. So never working by yourself, always having a crew around you, having open communication with that crew, being able to self-rescue. These type of things are going to really keep that from happening. And we've had to say we've all seen these YouTube videos of individuals that are, they're on the side of a building and they're stuck there and they have to get rescued. And you look at that and you're like, wow, that could have really been, avoided. That situation didn't need to happen. So, but if there's a medical emergency or somebody's in trouble, man, absolutely. If you have to do that, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we think like for us, I think we're pretty lucky here because we have a great relationship with the local heavy rescue team, and they're very skilled. Not specific to Salt Lake. They do a lot of high angle operations and confined space, all sorts of different on rope rescues, and they're very savvy with how to conduct those in a very quick manner. So maybe they're great. Yeah. I mean, if I had a coworker on site that could perform a rescue quicker than getting the fire department there, of course you're going to want to have that happen. Especially if you have a fire department or a local team that does not have the rope skills like other departments do. So, for me, I wouldn't feel bad about calling 911 and getting the Salt Lake HRT team here, but if I were in another city and I didn't know what was going on, I definitely would want my coworkers to be helping me out.
For sure. Awesome. All right, so another question. Is it okay to have a digital JSA? Like if you had it on your iPad and it was all filled out, is that okay? Or does this have to be like a printed document in a binder?
That depends on the client. For me, I have a client that wants paper. And so every morning when we start the job, we have a paper version of that. And I think that, that's more of just, what their needs are. I personally see things going more and more to paperless options with that. And I'm okay with that, me personally, but, it really depends on what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, that's my perspective too. You should have one, digital or hard copy, but it comes down to what your client requires of you, but you should have one, even if it's digital.
Okay. One question I personally had when you were talking earlier, Nate, you were talking about the difference between RDS and rope access. And if I remember correctly, SPRAT actually put out a detailed document about the difference between the two. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about, or am I imagining that?
I'm not familiar with it. If they do have one, it might be, yeah, I'm not familiar with it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think I had seen it.
Zach says that's right.
Oh, Zach says that's right.
Yeah, the helmet winner, he knows that they do have that as well. So,
all right. I'll have to see. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to dig that up now that I'm thinking about that. I'm sure Zach is right. That must exist.
There you go.
Put a link there already.
There's a link to it. Thanks, Zach. You're the man.
Zach, you're earning your helmet.
Great. All right, let's see. I think we have time for just one more question. All right, so we've got the job safety analysis, and we've got the rescue plan. Is that your whole safety plan, or is that just a piece of a bigger safety plan? And if so, what other pieces are there that make up your whole safety plan?
Jimmy, you might have a better perspective on the job site with that stuff.
Yeah. No, there are definitely extenuating circumstances for different job scenarios, and so we have that covers a lot. That covers a lot. Both of those, the rescue plan and the job JSA. But there are circumstances that that are different. The thing is with window cleaning, and if it was easy to do and it was completely safe, then there would probably be a whole lot more unskilled people that were doing it. But it's sad to say we're in situations where our skills are necessary, and so we may be put into danger. And then the whole human error thing about it, right? Think about a lot of window cleaners that get hurt. Maybe they have one rope that's too short. It's their safety line, and they end up on that safety line instead. And then they get to the end of the line, and there could be a fatality because they go right off of that. or they end up having to rope transfer, something like that. And so we try to like talk about those things, and that's part of our morning routine. Like, hey, what happens if this happens, or what happens if, you know, our main line breaks? And then we have those verbal communications. Sometimes certain things can't be put into written form all the way, so you have to be able to be adaptable in that situation.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, I think we covered quite a bit there. I think just to sort of wrap up, I'd like to say thanks to Nate and to Petzl for filming those example videos in their facility and providing them for this webinar. And thank you, Nate, for presenting today. I know I personally have learned quite a bit. And then Jimmy, he's always our stud of a window cleaner. He's our go-to guy. Thank you so much for being on here and giving us your real-world expertise. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Congrats, Zach, on your helmet, and thank you for your helpful links. This video is recorded, so we're going to be providing this elsewhere. And yeah, just again, thank you all so much for watching. We're just so excited for everybody who's interested in pushing forward the professionalism and safety of our industry. We think that's so important, and conversations like this really help. Cool. All right, well, thank you, everybody. All right, stay safe. Have a great rest of your day.